Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Hey, you guys. So this is the first episode of our Inner Health series, and I have been really looking forward to this because our first guest is someone who you have heard on the podcast before. He was in our coaches series, and he has really helped me a lot in my own personal journey. So we're going to be talking to Adam Atkinson. He's the head coach and creator of See You Later Leaner. And if you guys haven't heard the coaches series episode yet, definitely go back and listen to it. We recorded it we released it on January 7th of 2021. So of this year. So it's almost been a year. Go back and listen. You can find it on celestial.fit/podcast, or you can just scroll through your podcast platform. It's a really great episode. But today we're going to be talking a lot about blood work and lab work and how he has helped me and also how he helps other people. We're going to talk about the importance of getting blood work done and what can be done as a competitor to optimize your performance, your health, your results. So I have a lot of stuff prepared, but we're going to be sharing personal stories and results from my own work, and then how Adam's helped me and how he's helping others. So without further ado, welcome, Adam. So happy to have you back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's just get right into it. Why don't you tell us why you prioritize blood work and labs and how you learn to read them and why that's important for competitors?
Yeah. So, just by raising calories, and everyone thinks like reverse dieting is the end all be all to prep, but you don't really know if you've reversed long enough until you really look at the hormones directly. And the only way you're really going to know is if you look at labs. And if you still have some internal hormone issues going on, it's going to make it harder to lose. That's something to talk about too. Can you still lose with a skewed hormone profile? Absolutely. And, sometimes people think, well, my hormones are so messed up that I can't lose any weight at all. Unfortunately, we have a history that we've seen people starve to death before. And, things like anorexia exist. So, believe me, those people's hormones are absolutely crashed to try to protect their body from starvation. But, obviously taken too far ends in a bad result. And then, if you look at the medial blend there in a contest prep, can you do 3 or 4 hours of cardio a day and get there? Yes, but are you going to end up with the best result? And the reason we compete is for the best result. So we want to optimize these things, give you a good full hormonal gas tank before you hit your next prep.
I like that a lot. And to give you guys an idea, I gave Adam my blood work. I contacted him after my last show, which was in December, because I wanted to get my period back. And in the past, I would just throw shit at the wall, and I didn't like that approach. And I really wanted someone who understood how that is done and how I could do it more effectively and efficiently. So Adam so kindly responded in January. We got the blood work done, and by within a day, you had told me exactly what I needed to do. So can you go over maybe what you were looking for and why you recommended the test that you did for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I just want to thank your coaches too for being open to that, because that was something that we talked about. Would they be okay with this with me? And my one thing I've always liked about you, Celeste, is you've always been very loyal and very you always shout your team out. And my my thing was to be a kind of a bump up in your journey, not to take you completely as a client. So thank you for your trust in that.
Yes.
So yeah, just seeing you optimally perform. So, when you came to me, you had just finished a long contest prep. You had never done labs before. The thing that's going to be really important to talk about is when you go to your doctor, and this happened to you, you got just the basic CBC. You went in, ran through your insurance, and we got what we could for free, which was awesome, because then we were able to piggyback off of that and only spend like $75 for the rest of your tests, which is super helpful. So when you go to request labs, you really do, with your doctor, want to explain what you want drawn. And we can even post a link in our description on like what that looks like, so then our audience can draw that. But with that being said, a lot of doctors won't draw your hormones unless they think there's some kind of issue. And every doctor is going to be different. Every insurance is going to be different. My recommendation for cheap labs is definitely Life Extension. They're great. They have a ton of tests on there. We do a lot of GI tests through there as well, stool samples, stuff like that for people with digestive stuff. And that wasn't the case with you. So what we did was basically a complete hormone panel for you, because you had already had a lot of the other labs. I believe you submitted your labs to me in February, and you got them drawn like in January, if I remember right.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, do you want to go into detail on like kind of what we saw initially on your labs?
Yeah, definitely. So and I want to go back and say I've had lab work done before, but never really to the point of understanding what it was. Just doctors did this, and then you saw what was off, and then if you were, vitamin D deficient, you just started taking vitamin D. It was very basic. I never did it with an extensive review like what you provided for me. And going back to your point about like, I'm still working with my coaches with Team Edge, and they were happy that I had someone reviewing everything. And it was like really a team effort. And I think it's important for those of you listening, like if you are struggling with your hormones, or you want to make sure that everything looks good, I never blamed my coach for where I was at. Like I knew I was going to be depleted. If you're in prep for a year plus, like, come on, you're putting your body through a lot. You're going to probably deplete somewhere. So when we did the blood work, I hadn't had my period for a long time. And then you reviewed it and you provided me with a list of different supplements that I should take. And I started taking them. And within, I want to say I ended up emailing you like maybe a month or two later. And I was like, oh, it was like a month later. I said, I got my period. And it was strange and my coach thought, wow, this is really interesting that you got your period, because that was when I had lost my mom at the end of February. And I was going through so much stress in my life, but the protocols that you gave me, I think really, really helped me to maintain the balance that I needed internally through that. So I really was consistent with my supplements for months, and only recently they would make me so nauseous in the morning. Like I would take them and I just would get short of breath and nauseous. It would impact my workouts negatively. So I did have some resistance to taking them. And I was not as consistent, just being honest, but I guess that goes to show it was still helpful, because I've maintained my period this whole improvement season. And now we just did another hormone panel. This time I did the full comprehensive weight loss panel from Life Extension, because I didn't see a doctor or anything for that. But you had pointed out some of the changes, and I believe what was cool and what I can see in front of me was the testosterone came back up to normal levels. Maybe you could speak to it.
Big one.
Yeah, you could speak to it, because you're going to know how to explain it better than me.
I'll just kind of summarize everything that was off when we started and kind of like where we're at now. So the popular, how it went and how's it going, right?
Yes.
So first of all, we wanted to look at your liver enzymes, because your ALT did come back high. But I put AST in here as well, because even though you were normal, it did improve. So that was awesome. You were basically a 21 AST, and then you came down to 14. Your ALT was very high. Well, for the most part, like it was 42. I've seen way higher. You being a drug-free athlete, I knew it wouldn't be that elevated. So yeah, you were 42 and we got you down to 13. And just for reference on ALT, 0 to 32 is in the normal range. So you really have a lot of cushion there for when you start getting systemically stressed again during prep. You might see that go up a little bit. Test was a big one. And you have been a little low on your DHEA dosage recently. And I think we'll see this come up even higher. When you were going through a lot, you said your vitamin and mineral uptake wasn't exactly like you wanted it to be, but even then we still saw a huge improvement. So your test was bottomed out at 3 and we've got you up to 14 now. That range is 8 to 48 for females, depending on the lab that you get. Some of them will go up into the 70 or 80 range, so it does depend, and you have to watch that when you're looking at like PCOS clients. You'll see that hyperandrogenism and high tests typically, depending on the context of the scenario. Your estradiol was it was in range, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because estradiol and progesterone work in a ratio together. So we've got you up to 175 now. And now people are going to wonder, well, why would you want to raise estrogen? You're not outside of the high range. And now that you're just hormonally functioning, you're making more of this hormone. So that's a good thing. Progesterone was pretty much non-existent at 0.1. And now you came up to 11. And that range is 1 to 23. Now, the big thing I wanted to touch on here, the ratio is more important. So that is basically between progesterone and estradiol. You want to be within a 100 to 500 range on progesterone to estrogen. Anything above 500 would be progesterone dominant. But when you started with me on your labs, your progesterone to estrogen ratio was 1.16, and now you're 62.9. So we're getting there. We're getting that up higher. And I think once you start including that DHEA, and your vitamin D dropped on your most recent lab, because again, going back to taking pills again, you said you're kind of forgetful. So that should help influence these hormones to drive up. And I'm really excited to, probably in about 2 months, we'll do another draw. And I think you'll be in the clear for a really good, healthy prep after that.
Yes. And I definitely appreciate you explaining that in detail, because what was strange with the liver enzymes or the liver numbers is I had just had COVID as well. So I got COVID right after my show. And I want to say like that in conjunction with just coming out of a prep, my liver was probably really taxed, or at least I would imagine so. And then to see it improve so much was really, really great. Now, I want to point out something that freaked me out from my most recent blood draw. And now I'm being very consistent with my supplements, by the way. Like I check it off my to-do list every day. So that's been going well. And I'm like not force feeding it in the mornings. I'm usually taking them at night. So that's helping. But when I got my blood work back this time, I freaked out. I thought, oh my gosh, I have diabetes. Like I'm so unhealthy. My blood glucose is so high. It must be because I'm in so much body fat in this improvement season. And I was just freaking out. Like now I'm just in an unhealthy spot. Now I don't feel unhealthy, but I thought, damn, I really did a number. But you reassured me and you said, this is really probably because you are in your, like, this is the end of your improvement season. And that helped me be at peace. So can you share with us maybe some things people should consider when looking at their blood work and what to consider a red flag versus a pretty normal response to the demands of a competitor?
Yeah. So That is hard because the context of every situation is going to be different. So when you mentioned your blood glucose was high and we looked at it, I was like, well, you're also peak of your off season too. You've just had like a ton of stress recently too. People don't realize how much stress affects their body, and pretty much all these markers we're looking at, when they're skewed, it is stress derived for the most part. We get used to living with daily stressors in our life, and sometimes we just live with them so much we forget about them. And we say, I'll ask a client, are you stressed? And they're like, no, but I'm going through a breakup, or I'm working a lot. And then like the beans kind of spill, and you're like, you are really stressed actually. One of my clients just recently, she's going through a whole home renovation, and there's just been increases in pricing because wood and lumber have gone in cost so much. And yeah, like that's super stressful. And it affects you hormonally, emotionally. And that's where we start seeing a lot of these skews in the labs. Of course, when you add high cardio, lots of training, on top of that, you're going to start seeing these labs skew. One important thing that I did want to talk about is just because your labs were off doesn't mean that your coaches did anything wrong necessarily. Um, the problem is if they don't let you work with somebody to investigate these things, or maybe they just don't investigate them. But I love that they were willing to collaborate with me. So that's huge. So I've had some clients ask and their coaches give them a dead no on like, no, we want to control the whole thing, but they won't look at their labs either. So, and if they're in a contract on a team or whatnot, they kind of have to listen. So that kind of sinks in those situations. Yeah. But yeah, these adaptations happen. Now, one thing where I see really severe hormonal dysfunction is when you start getting into some of the Olympians that are, doing so many shows to qualify, and it's tough because it's wanting to win, or you can maybe base it off of points if you're getting close enough, right? And I couldn't think of a time where there's just more pressure to compete and almost cause the suppression to be, really, really bad. So one thing I'll say, going back to your labs, your test was 3, your estradiol was 86. What we probably would have seen had you kept prepping is your estradiol was going to be pretty much non-existent. So you were going to see that uptick across all of your hormones. Your progesterone was already completely bottomed out. And then, yeah, it just kind of causes those adrenal fatigue symptoms. But the one thing I wanted to say is this is like a game of golf. So, are there going to be things I do in a prep with one of my clients that helps these not suppress as much? Absolutely. I'm going to try to make their season not as long. I'm going to try to give them rest, maybe less days of training. But at the end of the day, we're still going to have some hormonal suppression. And we have to realize that that is normal. Knowing how to fix it and knowing how to adapt out of it is huge. And one thing I wanted to touch on is just like accountability. I've seen so many girls who say their hormones are messed up, and I've like DM'd them. I'm like, did you ever get labs done? And they're like, no. And I was like, you're 8 months post show. Like, why haven't you gotten labs? And you're just on Instagram blabbing that your hormones are off and you don't even know, Yes. And they're like, I'm broken. No, I'm like, you're not broken. Like, let's get your labs done. And they'll come back normal. And it's like, it's an adherence issue, not of my hormones or broken issue. And that's one of the messages I want to get across, because when people say like my hormones are messed up, like tell me specifically which ones they are. Don't just categorize it as hormones. Or I saw a coach the other day post like, my client's digestion's good and their food variety is awesome. So their hormones are in a good place. And I was like, that has nothing to do with your hormones. So I just want people to stop like classifying as hormones and just saying that that's like the end all be all without any specifics. We've made it through the ice age, teepees and campfires with tons of systemic stress, and we were still able to procreate and get past these times of life where stress was a major deal, and food availability was not that great. So a lot of people that say they're broken, like, our bodies are made to survive and thrive.
Love that. Yeah, such a good reminder and an important message of, rather than assuming your body isn't working for you, maybe start questioning, how can you start working for your body? Like, what needs to be done to support your body? If something feels off and you can assume or post that something is off, why wouldn't you do something about it? And if you are committed to this sport, honestly, I think it has a lot to do with longevity. And I want to get into that conversation about longevity, but let me rewind, because you said something that I was like, oh, if I don't ask this, I'm going to keep forgetting. Do you think, or could you explain how gaining muscle mass or losing body fat, or the process of prep versus improvement season, impacts numbers like testosterone or estrogen? Like, does gaining muscle increase testosterone? Is that a sign that things are going well? Is it more so a sign that other hormones are balanced?
So it can be, if somebody's taking an exogenous supplement like Anavar or something like that, they're probably going to gain some muscle, but they're also now suppressing their endogenous hormones, right? Because your body senses, hey, I've got androgens coming in. I probably need to make a little bit less. Now, women, this is a little bit more acute than men because the dosages are so much smaller. But one thing I'm seeing is two girls are taking higher dosages of SARMs because they think they're safe. That's like kind of a whole nother conversation, but it skews a lot of things. And the SARMs are selective up to a point, but when you take so much of it, now it can't be selective because it's systemic in the body. So there can be a lot of side effects and a lot of hormone suppression with SARMs too, if not used correctly. So that's something big to cover. And then, yes, specifically with the hormones, when you're creating and utilizing so much cortisol to deal with the stress, it actually depletes your progesterone. So just kind of like how we were talking about, your progesterone was bottomed out. That's why I was like, then tests bottomed out, and then estradiol was going to be the next thing in your scenario.
Okay, that makes sense. So it does play a role. They all kind of work in harmony. And what you had mentioned earlier was, we're looking for ratios. And you just mentioned SARMs can have an impact, of course. Enhancements of any kind can have an impact. What about things like peptides? Because I think this is becoming more popular lately. I'm sure it's been popular, but I've been hearing about it more. How do those play a role?
Yeah, peptides are definitely not going to affect it because now you're not dealing with the direct like ovaries or testicles, in terms of, producing. So, things like HGH or, ipamorelin, CJC, these things aren't suppressive to your, like your endogenous hormones like testosterone and progesterone. In some cases, it can help to some degree, in terms of, helping that uptick and longevity.
Okay. Now, how do you approach someone who is, if it's different at all, but someone who's straight out of a show, maybe they're cycling off of whatever they were taking enhancement wise, and their mood, their energy, they feel so bad, they just feel bleh. How do you help someone in that situation? But if their labs look okay, or maybe not as off as you would expect, how do you work with that type of complicated situation?
Yeah, if the labs aren't as bad, we know they can probably return to the stage a little bit quicker. And then we also know some of that may have been more drug derived on the suppression versus the prep. There are genetic outliers. I've had girls 6 weeks post prep almost look fully recovered, and it's unreal. But there are also girls who came to me and I felt like I did less for them as a coach because they were already in such good shape that, there are a few genetic outliers. But if we take advantage of that and just keep them lean all year round, they're going to end up with the same wind up. I think with younger girls too, it's still common, right? But it's the older you get, the harder it is to get this stuff back. So and then once you reach menopause, of course, then you're starting to look at, either using replacement hormones or, just gain as good as you can without, which is suboptimal, obviously, at that point.
Makes sense. Okay, so how does having better blood work support someone in their physique development and changes?
Yeah. So, just in general, if we have higher testosterone levels and, remember estrogen's really good for connective tissue as well. This can absolutely help you in your muscle growth, your development. Other things I'll say is, I know this competing has affected a lot of my girls, sex lives with their partner. So if their libido increases, they're usually happier. And that's always a good thing. And just in general, just feeling better and kind of feeling woke, I think sometimes these girls just don't really recover during prep. And one thing I should mention, these tests ratios are super important with men. I don't know if you have any male listeners.
Oh yeah, we do.
I see so many men with just super high tests and then their estrogens just tanked. And then they wonder, like, well, what if I go up to 800 milligrams of tests from 500? They're like, I start growing. And it's like, well, yeah, that test that you're taking finally aromatized to estrogen because you were taking so much AI, like now you're growing because you have estrogen, not necessarily because you had more tests.
Oh, that's really, really interesting and helps to, I think, eliminate some of the mistake making or confusion around it's not just about getting testosterone up, it's about having a balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, and guys are very like scared of gyno and should be. But if you're testing these levels and you're acutely advancing in your cycles versus just hiring a coach that you've never cycled before and you're on 4 compounds out the gates, it's probably not a great idea.
Yeah. What's the female equivalent to this in terms of enhancements? Like, what are some things that women might be worried about or need to consider?
So in terms of when you're looking at being an enhanced athlete, there's quite a few concerns. The first thing I would say is any kind of masculine quality you get, like a guy can get gyno cut out, and I think that's almost the gift of being a male. Anything we do gives us more male characteristics aside from the gyno, and that's removable. Anything with women, like facially or whether it be clitoral enlargement, is more than likely going to be permanent, the voice deepening. So that's the first consideration. The next thing I would say is the poison's really in the dose. Yes, there are a lot of different compounds you can use, and some are more female friendly, so to speak, but the poison's really in the dose. And then legitimacy is key. So making sure you're getting a good source. I would definitely recommend testing your products. And then last, I would say the length of time. There's a lot of things you can do. For a long time, I had my women send me voice memos just so I could hear their voice every 2 weeks. And then I let them know, here's some other things to watch out for. But there's actually a voice pitch analyzer. I think it's through like Google. You can actually test the decibels of your voice now. So now they don't even have to do that. They can just use the app.
Wow. So this is interesting. And like you said earlier, I'm a natural athlete. I've never considered drugs. I don't consider them an option for me, mainly for these reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, I understand it is an option for a lot of women, and it's something that a lot of competitors are using. You can't necessarily beat around the bush about that. It's definitely real. And I think it's good that we're talking about it to some degree, that people can be aware of it and also mindful before taking it and making sure they're working with a coach who can support them through that process. Sometimes I think people will just take drugs and not even communicate that with their coach. Can you tell us about the importance of communicating all these variables with your coach?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's coaches that are against it. And I feel like if your clients want to do that, it's just time to turn them over and, give them the help they need. You can get really lost in forums and everything on this. I've seen crazy stuff as far as like girls need a PCT, and it's like, well, not really, and it's just the suppression is acute. Now you do need to focus on the hormonal restoration afterwards, but it's not like you're going to take a serum or HCG like a man would after their cycle. So you see a lot of misinformation. So it is really important that your coach does know what they're talking about, but also, at the end of the day, I want to sleep with what I'm doing. And if I ruin a woman facially, I just couldn't be okay with that. I mean, I would say, all the girls that compete are very beautiful, and like I don't want to wreck that. So it's a big responsibility. So I have had cycles that have gone just a little south, and we say, hey, we got to pull the plug on this. Your voice sounded a little scratchy. I'd rather be more careful than more aggressive. And we stopped the cycle there. I literally last week had a girl who was getting a little more clitoral swelling than she would have liked. Now, when you see that initial swelling, it may not be permanent, but there's definitely a lot of receptors down there. So we pulled that down, and she noticed that everything seemed to go back to normal. But had we kept going, that's going to be permanent. She obviously voiced it to me because she's concerned about it. I said, well, let's just call it a cycle here. I think we were 8 weeks in. We were planning on 10. And I said, just because that was our plan doesn't mean we have to follow through with it,
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so it would have been permanent if you kept going. Now, what if she wanted to cycle again in the future?
So that's great that you've mentioned that, because what we talked about was using less of the compound. It was when we had bumped up, because she never had an issue with it before. And it was a very, one thing I didn't mention too, you do typically want to select compounds that are more anabolic and less androgenic. So this was also a slightly more mild cycle for her too. So the androgenic rating was just a little bit higher too. So we knew that would be a potential issue. And this is a wellness competitor too. So we're pushing size just a little bit more than bikini. But I said, let's pull back. We know that this many milligrams is going to be your sweet spot for this supplement and or this compound, so to speak.
Interesting. Well, I think it's just a big job and something that both parties have to be willing to communicate on and address. And sometimes I think it can be hard no matter what, like if you're natural or you're not natural, pulling back on anything that you expected you could take further is difficult. Like when you have to pull out of a prep because like your tank is literally empty and you're not going to create a good result, that sucks. So these times and moments come as competitors, and I think it's a commitment to the long game that matters. So how does making sure, or how, let me rephrase this question. What is optimal, or what could you say might be optimal for competitors to maintain a long-term career in this sport?
I think honestly, you have to do what makes you happy in the long run. And if you're not happy, I just think you're going to burn out, Now you do have to take steps back. You're going to have to take time away from the stage, but I do think it's important to you just kind of always be cohesive with your coach, and the fact that your coach always supports your end goal on what that is. I have a really interesting client right now. She is the most type A client I think I've ever had. And I tried to pull her out of her show last week because I just got the vibe that she was, all in. I want to win. That's just how I felt. So I called her. I was like, I think we should move you back. Like, you've got a really incredible physique. I feel like I know you want to win. You're like all in on this. She practices posing like all the time. And she was like, honestly, she was like, I don't care how I place this next weekend. And I was like, really? I was like, that is so weird because you were so emotionally into this, but yet you're so not emotionally into this. And I said, I've done this 20 years. I've never had anyone like you. I was very perplexed by that. But I said, okay, we're going in. And she said, I want to, improve my lab work in the off season and then do it even bigger next year. And but winning's not really a factor for her. And I thought that was super interesting.
I think that's really interesting. And also an underlying message or lesson in that is the fact that humans really are meant to thrive off of the result less than they're meant to thrive off of the process, not the result. Yet so many of us focus on the result instead of the process. And she's type A in the process, yet she is not committed to the outcome. And I think that honestly is a key to longevity for athletes, because you have to love the game. And in bodybuilding, the game is not the moment you step on stage. The game is every single day for weeks, then years and months and months and months and months and years again of prepping, of improving, of building, of perfecting. Like, if we can see bodybuilding as that and the stage as like another Saturday, I think that can take us further than I have to get first place. I have to qualify right now. I have to become a pro.
The big thing, there's a book by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. And one of the is titled Let Go Now or Fall. And I thought about that quote and I was like, man, that's really interesting. And the more we let go of the things we can't control, and we really can't control winning, but we can do everything we can to be our best. I did team Zoom with my clients about this, and we actually wrote down on paper like what was holding us back. And we had the option to share with other people or not. And then, I burned mine. People disposed of theirs in a lot of interesting way. And that was our commitment to ourselves, to let go of that thing that's holding you back. And I think sometimes, people do focus on winning so much. Like, I've heard a lot of people say like second place is last place, but it's like, man, they still give out second place pro cards sometimes. So like, do you want a pro card or not? At the end of the day, I think it really comes down to, focusing on the process, like you said, and controlling the controllables, coming in your absolute best. And you're more to likely win if you do that.
Yeah. I love that. Just such an important message. And again, it speaks to this sport is so much more than just physique development. Like it's really mental and it is emotional and it requires commitment beyond just executing on a diet or training or supplements. And you just told us a story about two of your clients. Now, can you tell us maybe how a client came to you, if this is a situation you've had, a client came to you who really needed to improve her blood work or his blood work, and then followed protocols as a natural athlete for supplementation and got better results because of it, or that you believe dramatic changes happen from before they got the blood work working with you to after they got the blood work and then
Yeah, I pick up a lot of girls who are kind of chronic dieters prior, and maybe we do a prep and they actually embrace the off season a little bit more. They stay in it a little bit longer. So if I can talk them out of the dieting mentality, they end up bringing a better package because now, they're not acutely holding more body fat around their glutes because they start a prep in estrogen dominance or just barely outside of estrogen dominance. So I actually, interestingly enough, I had a client that did so well. She became progesterone dominant in her off season with me, which was the first time I had ever seen it. I was pretty amazed. And it's interesting because as a client, she seems stressed. She's very like anything happens, she's going to email me and let me know. But she just wants to follow the plan so badly. So I kind of take it on my end as she's stressed or freaking out about anything. I don't think she's really freaking out. She just wants to execute everything 100%. And yeah, she was the first and only client I've seen get her progesterone so high that she was out of that 500 range.
Wow, damn.
Yeah, so that was definitely a surprise to me. I do have a really cool story like that happened recently. I can't say the name of the person because they were on another team and hired me out. But they gave me permission to talk on my in my Facebook group about it. This client had competed. So she's a lab review client. She had competed most of the year, trying to achieve Olympia points. And at the end of the season, she had went to her normal doctor to get her blood work done. And her thyroid hormones were really low. So they put her on medicine. And she kind of came to me and she said, I'm on thyroid meds and I'm not even sure I need them. And I said, well, what's the context of this? And she let me know how long she'd competed. And she said she went to the doctor immediately post show. And she had listened to a few of my podcasts. And she was like, do you think that I need these? And I said, honestly, you probably got diagnosed so early because those thyroid hormones suppressed during prep, you probably did look, hypothyroid, and you're probably better now since you're outside of prep. Now granted, you're getting that exogenous hormone to come in. I would just have a quick call with your doctor and see if he's okay with you going off of it, because that would be my recommendation. We got her labs 6 weeks later and her thyroid was back to normal. And then she asked me, she was like, how did you know that? And I there's a study back in 1951 with a doctor, his name was Dr. Greer, if I remember, but he had worked with misdiagnosed hypothyroid clients. Some of them were on exogenous thyroid for like 30 years. I see a lot of competitors saying, my coach had me on T3 and my thyroid's ruined. Well, the thyroid gland's like super resilient, to be honest. So what he saw is these people's thyroids improved within 2 weeks of being off the medication when they were on it for 30 years. Wow. So that's a really good, just thing to throw out there that, sometimes doctors prescribe too easily. They don't necessarily work with people that push themselves as hard as bodybuilders. And I'm not going to corner this to bodybuilders, because I work with swimmers too. It's endurance athletes. It's people that push themselves. I'm sure it happens with football players too. Whenever you're excelling at a high level, these adaptations definitely occur.
Yeah, no, I love that example, because I think, like you said, any athlete, especially like elite athletes who are pushing themselves to any extremer level, or just people, I see people even at my gym showing up and they're killing it. And I'm like, are you a competitor? Are you an athlete? No, they're just, that's just how they live. And I think you're right. Like, an average person now is not a elite athlete or performing and eating and training like one. They're probably obese, honestly, if we're looking at averages. So I love that story too, because I think competitors can freak out a lot about their thyroid and really worry about it. And that kind of story and evidence actually may guide someone to not go worst case scenario and instead go, what other possibilities exist?
And what we have to remember as we age, these variables that were good aren't always guaranteed to be good. There's autoimmune, there's all kinds of things out there. I have a client right now with she had pituitary tumor, and her doctor has her on literally every hormone. It's it's estrogen, progesterone tests, HGH. She just doesn't produce hormones naturally. And there's always going to be circumstances. There are going to be people that have hyper or hypothyroid, and they still can compete and they can still do well.
That's interesting. Actually, I've always been curious, if someone's doing hormone replacement therapy and their doctor's bringing them up to a normal level, is it possible to manipulate that, or maybe it's already being manipulated by their doctor in such a way that it makes their physique look better?
Yeah, there's a huge debate in natural bodybuilding going on about that right now. And absolutely, it's a total game changer, because a guy, his test is going to tank at the end of the prep. And if you're getting it exogenously, you're always going to be able to stay in a normal range, right? So that's kind of the cool part of it. Are they getting to a super physiological range of tests? No, but they are in the normal range, and that allows them to compete naturally, depending on the federation. And a lot of people have something against that. And it is like definitely enhanced in my mind. So I don't think TRT should be in natural bodybuilding, but I don't know what the rules are per 27, 28, 29, 30 natural bodybuilding federations we have right now. That's kind of the problem, is they divided so much. And I used to do a lot of natural contest prep. I just take my natural athletes into the NPC to play with the best.
Yeah, I like that too. Even as I've heard people say, oh, I want to compete. And this is not a dig on those of you who do this, by the way, but I've heard people say they want to compete in the natural leagues because they don't want to go up against people who are enhanced. And I'm like, there's so many natural competitors in a league that doesn't regulate for drug use. And why not, stand up there with them too and see where you can take your body. I get really inspired by the thought of that, actually.
Yeah. And I think it's awesome, like the judges aren't going to give you bonus points from being natural, but
Exactly.
it's pretty cool if you are. I truly believe that I have one of the very few natural wellness competitors,
Oh, wow.
Alicia Sturkey, on my team as an IFBB pro. And that's pretty amazing. So she's going to be doing the Weeder Naturals. Fran Thomas, another one of my clients, is doing the Weeder Naturals, and she's a lab review client. Angela Rosselli, she's won a lot of Masters Pro shows. She's doing the Weeder Naturals this weekend in the Open, which we're pretty excited about.
That is so cool. I want to do that show someday. I love seeing that show because, I mean, you get to actually see these girls and guys in the IFBB who are natural, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's achievable. How crazy and how amazing.
Yeah. There's a genetic component to everything we do. And, I kind of joke about this in my Facebook group because we'll be on calls, and I just always tell people I don't turn pugs into giraffes. You got to have like the structure to make me take you there in a long neck competition. So, if someone's wanting to do women's physique in their bikini, it's just probably not a good idea. The outcome of that's just not going to be, great. And you just do have to be truthfully honest with people what to expect. I've seen a lot of girls that have, trying to move to figure. And I'm like, man, unless you do a whole lot of things and your body just happens to really respond to those things well, it's just might be a facial or, disaster. And everyone has a choice on what they do. Maybe they want that. So, that's a personal conversation they have to have with their coach. And if they're okay with it, I'm okay with it. I just think there kind of comes a time, and me and my wife were just talking about this. We value so much how we look, but it's only a piece of us. At the end of the day, guys, we're all going to get wrinkles, we're all going to get gray hair, and then we're like competing with the best look at the nursing home. But at the end of the day, does that really matter? So I just have a thought process with my clients that kind of goes like this. I want my clients to be able to look back on their life and not have any regrets of any of the decisions they made. And that's why I kind of take the drug topic like really seriously. I definitely don't push it. I just kind of talk to my clients and almost have them convince me, is this a good decision for you?
Yeah, definitely. Rather than trying to sell them on it, it's more so empowering people to consider the best options for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that's probably my downfall. I'm relatively conservative in that aspect of, I'm not just going to tell you to jump on something, but once you do jump on something, we're going to weigh out the options of what's the best for you in that time frame. And femininity is just huge for me. And I'm proud to say I've had multiple women's physique pros who still look feminine, and that's very rare these days.
I think it's more impressive when someone can capitalize on a little and make it seem like a lot, rather than someone who uses a lot but doesn't capitalize on the little opportunities.
Yes. And that's where like synergy with creating these protocols on, this supplement drives mTOR more. So you're going to get better nutrient uptake along with what you're taking. Things like that can be very beneficial to create synergy with maybe not just taking Anavar, but, taking something that maximizes the effect. So there's a lot of that we do when we, design, like me and all my coaches design protocols for clients.
Yeah, that's really cool to know, because there must be things that you can do to capitalize on it. So, do you ever have people where they don't want to take anything anymore? They want to be natural athletes, and
I do actually.
okay.
So that's kind of interesting. And yeah, life changes and they're totally allowed to do that. And I'm all for it. It's cool because I almost enjoy that because it's rare. And then usually at that point, they're kind of leaving the competition world. So I know I'm probably going to lose them at some point in time. But to me, that's a happy ending, So what are we going to do for your health? Let's get you situated so then your long-term health is good. I actually had this about, I want to say 2 months ago. I had a client who's they're married now and she's going to start a family. So she said maybe return to the stage at some point, but for right now, No. So, we're going to make sure that she's hormonally and nutritionally a good spot to get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy. So we'll see. Hopefully I coach her through the pregnancy. As you've seen, I'm doing a lot of that right now. Like I want to say like a eighth of my team is pregnant right now.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So it's been cool. It's been fun. There's been a lot of variety, with probably more variety than there's ever been with my clientele right now.
I love that. And so why is it that you want to work with, or why do you work with girls like myself, specifically just on blood work and labs?
It just really educates people. And I feel like I owe it to the industry to make it better. And ever since I've done macros, I've not done anything that I thought would impact the sport any more than macros aside from this. And now I think this is the next big thing. You learn, the more you learn about your clients, the more you do customization for them. And this is just an ultra fine tooth comb to be able to customize things for your clients. You learn about their stressors and how they handle stress during a prep, and you start learning things on what we can do even better for the next one.
That's awesome. I really, really love that. And I appreciate all the work that you've done for me. And I wanted to know, if someone wants to work with you to address their labs or read them, help optimize their performance, their health, all the things that we've talked about, how would they go about contacting you and starting that process?
Yeah, they can reach out through Instagram, or they can go to my website, seeyoulaterleaner.com, and they can fill out an inquiry there. My coaches, Kat and Zach, also read labs as well. So they do a few lab reviews here and there as well. So it's really awesome that they're growing their business that direction as well.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. And is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you about this topic?
I don't think so.
Okay, amazing. Well, that was so fun and really insightful as well. I'm glad that we covered as much as we did, and that conversation just flowed into lots of different topics that I didn't even expect we'd cover, but I'm glad that we did. So I appreciate you. I'm going to put your website and your Instagram in the show notes page. You guys, that's always at celestial.fit/podcast. We'll also I'll put a link to the life extension, and then I'll also put a link to your core nutritionals, Adam, with the recommendations for that, if that's
cool. That will be perfect. And okay. One thing I should mention is, we use a lot of different supplements, but Core has been awesome about adding a lot of the things that I have been using for my clients. So I've got to give them a huge shout out to not only just being a great sponsor, but just supporting my vision in what I do. And, a lot of times companies just want you to sell their product. They've really been awesome about adding things I use and allowing me to stay within their window. So thank you guys.
Oh, love that. And again, you guys, thank you so much for listening. Adam, thank you for coming onto the podcast. If you guys liked this episode, again, go check out the Coaches Series episode. We got such great feedback on that, because if you liked the depth and the detail Adam shared on this one, you're really gonna like that one. So go back and listen to it. I'll put a link to it in the show notes page as well, so you guys can find it more seamlessly. But with all that being said, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.